So welcome to People with Passion for Pets, Miranda and Victoria. I'm so excited to have you.
It's so nice to be here.
Yes, it's really wonderful to be here.
So Miranda and Victoria, you are the ladies behind the popular podcast, The Animal Files. And I listen to your episodes and you always have some really fun topics. So I'm excited to talk to you about what inspired you to do your podcast and what's in the future. How did you get started? What made you start a podcast?
No, I'll let Miranda start that because she's the one that asked me to do it. So I'll let her kick it off.
Well, Victoria and we discovered that we both have a passion for animals, but in different ways. I have a background as an animal health technologist. Initially, when I was thinking about a podcast, I was thinking about it on my own. And I'm like, I'm not ready to do this on my own. And then suddenly I was like, oh, why don't I ask Victoria? She was on board like immediately. So
immediately. Like, oh, yeah, sure.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So Victoria, so did you have any background in podcasting or was this like a totally new venture?
So it was completely new and it's very welcomed and I have loved every second of it since we started.
Miranda alluded a little bit to your background. So talk a little bit about your background and what you do.
Well, I started off as an energy practitioner. I'm a level 4 healing touch for animals practitioner. And through that, I went even more into energy. I got my Reiki master teacher certification. I've always had a lot of experiences with my animals. I've had cats my whole life. And that right there was that was the connection, the spirituality and the animals. And then I got into animal translation. I call it that, not necessarily, it's communication, but I call it translation.
Yeah, and that is really so fascinating about your podcast, The Animal Files, is that you bring those two worlds so well together, right? So you have Miranda, and Miranda, I did want you to talk a little bit about your background as well, but you come more from the technical side, is that correct?
Yes, that's right. Like I said, I was trained as an animal health technologist and I worked in the vet clinics for a few years, but I also had my own business doing pet sitting and dog walking services. Part of my training as an animal health technologist was having to go to the Humane Society and work in the euthanasia section. Unfortunately, there are also animals who get euthanized because the shelter has run out of room and they need to make room for new animals coming in. Some of the reasons that people were surrendering their animals, the dog barked too much or the animal grew too big, different things like this, where it was, these things could be prevented or at least greatly reduced if people understood more like what to think about before they get an animal in the first place, for example, but also understanding the responsibility of having an animal so that they're not getting them on a whim.
Yeah, and I so agree with that. That is really one of our close to heart topics as well, because both Jim and I have been, involved in the Humane Society and rescues. And Jim used to work on the Big Island of Hawaii for the Humane Society, and same situation where he was unfortunately involved in having to see how many wonderful animals have been euthanized just because there isn't any room to take care of them. And it's just a wonderful thing that you guys are, found each other. And the interesting thing is you don't live close to each other, right? You're in
Nope.
2 different countries even.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably like 3,000 miles away, something like
that's
that.
awesome.
That's the wonderful thing about the technology we have now.
But how do you come up with your topics? Where do the ideas come from?
Miranda? She's an incredible researcher. She is brilliant in that aspect. So she takes that and she runs with it and she gets us the greatest topic.
A lot of the stuff that we talk about overlaps to some extent. We can talk about it in different ways so that it's new and fresh.
Yeah, no,
So
we have a lot of fun when we do the shows. And
Mhm.
we wanna, like, I'm the snarky one. So I get that's my role. I keep things moving and I get pretty snarky. Got lots of soapboxes. So I tend to be the comic relief, juxtaposed to her scientific research and her knowledge. And I think it really works because it ends up becoming entertaining, not only for the listener, but for us as well. One constant that goes through every single episode, no matter whether it's a serious episode or a fun episode, is stress and
Mhm.
how stress affects our pets. Um, so we use that, I think, a lot of times as a jumping off point for the topics, because
Mhm.
it's such a pervasive issue for animals. Any behavior problem that an animal has is most likely due to stress.
Mhm.
Where is that stress coming from? Is it environmental? Is it from us humans? Is it a health issue? So that's pretty much a good jumping off point for a lot of our topics.
Yeah. And just slightly below the stress theme is safety is a next big one. We're very passionate about trying to help people keep their animals safe and understand what is putting their animals at risk and what they can watch out for.
that is awesome. And those are definitely topics that are dear to our hearts as well. Toria, because you feel from your standpoint that, like you mentioned, stress is a very dominant thing right now in animals in this society.
I think it's always been a dominant thing. Animals, they don't naturally blend into our human world. They can adapt, but there is definitely a difference in the way animals think and how they move through their world, as opposed to how humans move through their world. And that can cause friction in the animal because they don't know how to behave. A lot of times we humans expect animals to behave in a way that we would behave. We brought them, well, they chose our world, but we also brought them into our world, and they're still trying to navigate it. Even centuries and centuries of them living amongst humans, they're still trying to navigate our ever-changing human world. And that causes a lot of stress. Now, not all of it is horrible stress. It's going to cause them to die early, but it does attribute to a lot of the issues that people have with their companion animals.
I agree with that greatly, but I like to call it a communication problem, because as humans, we communicate mostly verbally. And although that is not, I should say, we think we communicate mostly verbally, but
Right.
truly, right, we aren't really aware, or most people aren't aware of their body language and the energy that they portray. But I always try to tell people right away, animals are 98% body language energy. And so when they communicate, they read our energy, they read our intentions. And a lot of times what people don't understand is that they say one thing, like, for instance, to give you an example, I want my dog to stop barking, or I want my dog to stop jumping, but their energy and their body language is a completely different story, right? Because they themselves are upset, they might be yelling. So it's almost like I like to tell them, well, you're barking with the dog, right? Because you're yelling and you're upset, but at the same time you think the dog should be quiet. And so shouldn't we model quiet, and then would the dog be quiet too, right? So I think those are some of the things that I can see with that as well.
Yeah, and
And
we
of
brought those up in our episodes that
Mhm.
when you're yelling at your dog, you're barking back, so they're gonna bark with you. It's
Yeah.
just the
Yeah.
nature of the animal.
And of course,
And
there's the aspects as well of not fully understanding the animal's body language, because body communication can be very, very subtle. And most people are not trained to recognize their communication. And so it usually takes it escalating to biting or some kind of aggressive behavior or something like that, or behavior that's not appreciated in some way.
And what I feel too is that people don't really understand, like you're saying, the subtle signs of stress in animals, and they're often overlooked. And so then the animal has to almost become more obvious in what's going on, whether or not sometimes it's messing in the house, or
Right.
barking all the time, or destroying things, because that's the only way that the animal could express itself in that situation.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting topic. And I could see where, as you were saying, you keep coming back to that throughout your episodes, because it's certainly something that is an underlying issue in so many different areas.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And like you had mentioned, the whole communication thing, that's also why I call it translation, because the animal's always talking and they need to understand what you're saying. So it's more of a translation thing. And, it's people like yourself who work on that level. When it becomes the animal behavior, we need more people like that, because it's just the difference of how our brains work.
Yeah, and that's a very beautiful way of putting it. I always like to tell our dog training customers, there really aren't bad behaviors. There are wanted and unwanted behaviors as we're living together with our dogs. But the dog, most of the time, if there's an unwanted behavior, the dog is only doing it because he's getting paid for it. And I always said, I'm going to write this book, and it's going to be titled Attention is the Most Valuable Currency in the World, because we pay our dogs or our pets with our attention. And the more we pay them, the more they're going to do the things, right? And oftentimes we pay them in the wrong ways. And that, I guess, is my job as an animal behaviorist, is to teach people, when that dog jumps and you are interacting and you're saying, get down, stop it, push him down, you are interacting, you're giving attention, you're paying that dog. And so he's going to continue to do that because that's working for him. It's like, hey, that's what I want. I want attention.
Yep.
That's all I want. So
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
I love the word animal translator, but of course you're on a different level than I am. I'm just more in tune with, and it comes from really being around horses mostly, because they're even more supple in the way that their body language energy connects, and in the way we can work with them. But what I always find so fascinating is that dogs, cats too, but specifically dogs, are actually very adept to understanding us, right? Even though we don't speak their language, they have become so in tune that if anybody, and I know we have a lot of people in our audience that own dogs, when you own a dog for a little while, that dog has become so in tune with you. And that's when it becomes so apparent how the energy works, how the body language really is understood by them.
Another thing about the communication and the stress as well is that people don't think about their pets' natural instincts and natural behaviors. And, like Victoria was kind of talking about, how we sort of try to humanize the animals, and we want our animals to behave the way we would expect another human to behave in, being societies.
That doesn't work with animals.
Yeah. So it's helping people to learn how to work with their natural behaviors instead of against them.
Yeah, because the dog's going to bark. It's part of their nature. You can't stop a dog from barking. And why would you? Because that bark is what's going to save you if something was to happen. Understanding the instinctual nature of an animal is actually animal spirituality. It's why I do what I do, because their instinctual nature is what makes them them. And we can't take that away from them. So it's really important that we work with their natural instincts, as Miranda said, and we bring that into as many episodes as we can as well.
I think that's a big topic too, is that oftentimes people don't realize, especially when it comes to, from my perspective, when it comes to dogs, that there are meant to be a certain way because that's what they were bred to do. That's what their inherent nature is as that specific dog. And then they were put into a situation where they have no outlet for any of the beautiful skills that they have, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I find that with cats. There's so many people that humanize cats, and I'm the crazy cat lady. And I have moments where I might pretend, but ultimately, my cats are cats and I let them be cats. I'm not going to take that away from them. If they want to go kill every bug they see, I'm not going to stop them. That's what they do. And every time we do try to change that, when we try to humanize the animal, again, there's where the stress comes in, because you are creating stress within the animal because they're trying to be something they're not.
I consider myself a pet parent. I'm their mom. And,
Mhm.
I talk to them, even though I know that they don't speak English, but I do understand also that my dogs, because they have lived with me for so many years, they understand the energy that I portray when I tell them you're a good dog, or but at the same time, it's about understanding that they also have needs, that are animal needs, right? And that they have to chew on a bone, or like you said, they have to be able to hunt, or they have to be able to be outside and run or bark or do the things that they're meant to do.
Mhm.
This might be a good title for one of your podcasts, but you can't lie to your dog.
Mm.
Mm-mm.
Right, you can't.
Nope.
Or to your horse, or to any other animal. And I guess that's one thing that I find, and that really helped me as a behaviorist and as a dog trainer, is when I had horses, and I mentioned that earlier, because they're very, very sensitive to body language, energy. And so then you have the story about your horse, right? And so I was always like, oh, Dixie, she gets scared at everything. If there's a shadow around the corner, she'll get jumpy and dancy. And she was always very, very energetic. And then my husband's horse is very laid back and he's very relaxed. Well, guess what? When I ride my husband's horse all of a sudden isn't relaxed. And when my husband rides Dixie, all of a sudden Dixie isn't jumping at any of the shadows. So guess what? It had to kind of be the rider, right? It's not the horse, it's the rider. And that really brought it home to me. But it helps me show people in our dog training, because so many people have these stories around their pets, and especially when there is a problematic story or something they don't like, it's the always hyper, and he can never, he's a lap and he can calm down, and that's why he constantly barks. And what we like to do is we just like to show first and then show the people how they can get the same behavior, because people don't believe you when you just tell them, right? So when we walk in and the dog that's bouncing off the walls and is running all over, within 5 minutes of us being there, is calm and laying down and just watching us talk. And they're like, what just happened? I'm like, yeah, this is the energy that we portray. And the dog picks up on that, and an animal will respond very, very quickly to leadership and what you're showing them. And I think that's just what we want people to understand. It really is all about body language, energy, and it's about our intention. And I mentioned earlier, I'm a meditation teacher, and as humans, we don't understand how our energy actually is reflected out into the world. So to go back to that horse example, when I'm in my mind, I want to be the calm rider, but my energy is, I'm scared. I can't lie to that horse. The horse knows my real feelings, right? I can say all I want. Oh, be quiet. I'm quiet. I'm not scared. No, I'm scared.
So we have mentioned in some of our shows that an anxious person is going to have an anxious animal.
Mhm.
A person who is full of fear is going to have an animal that's full of fear. They just absorb it, and that's just part of their natural way. But on top of that, animals also tend to give themselves jobs. So if you are dealing with some stresses or issues in your life at work or with family, whatever, a lot of times our animals will choose the job to take that away from us, to help support us by absorbing more of it. And that ends up, if they do it for too long, that can end up making them sick, but they do it so unconditionally. It's just their natural way. It's just them taking what they naturally do and then putting in their own intention, say, no, you need my support, so I'm going to be there for you. And then they take more of it. And we need to be aware that animals by nature are empathic. They will feel everything that is coming off of you. So your energy is important. Your thoughts are important. Your words are important. How loud you are is important, because they're going to interpret all of that and then decide, okay, I need to be this role for this person at this point, or, oh my gosh, I am so scared that I'm just going to be in a constant state of anxiety. So we need to be really conscious of that for their sake.
They really feel what we feel. And when you have a companion animal that has been with you for a while, it will mirror the things that you're feeling. It will mirror your fears and, when you're anxious and you're stressed. So yeah, I agree with you 100% there.
Yeah, it's just something to be conscious of, because the other thing that we have to remember, and Miranda can probably expand on this a little bit more, animals also don't do well with change. So Miranda has done a lot of research on this, because we've talked about this as well. Do you want to expand on that? Because it's not something that we really attribute to our animals. We don't like change, but we assume that the animal is just going to go with the plan, and that doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't. Well, I think, again, if we kind of go back to their wild ancestors, they need to have a routine, pretty much a routine to follow on a regular basis in order for them to survive. Because if they kept changing things all the time, like they would change where they hunted, or they like their water and stuff like that, they wouldn't know what to expect, those types of things. And it continues with our domesticated animals, that they really want to have that routine and familiarity. So it's really important to have certain key things that stay the same for them, like being fed at the same time, being walked at the same time. But then when the environment changes, you move furniture around, or you suddenly have a lot of people in the home, or you move to a new place, and those are all things that can be very difficult for them to adjust to. Obviously sometimes we can't prevent those things from happening, but we can do things to help minimize the stress and help them to adjust to those changes.
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
communication works too. Like if you actually I'm a big believer in having conversations with your animals, whether you believe they understand every word you're saying or not. But if you're having a conversation, okay, this is what's going to happen. We'll try to minimize it for you, but I just want you to be aware that there's going to be changes. And it's not like the words are important. It's the energy that's important.
Yes.
It's that you are thinking about them and you are bringing them into the conversation, however that may be on their end.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I love that. I love that intent. And that's what I like to tell people from a mindfulness perspective. If you have as a person, if you have an intention, your body language energy will communicate that. And we still don't really understand how profound that is, but that's like pages and pages of conversation is, when you just have an intention and so I love the way you put that when you say just to put them into the equation and take them into consideration. And I agree with you, Miranda, because we always teach, like in our book, Keep Your Paws on the Road, we talk about traveling with pets, and that can be very, very stressful to animals, because again, it's constantly changing. It's one of the reasons why Jim and I started to travel in a fifth wheel rather than in vacation rentals and hotel rooms, because one of the things we found is that our animals were always a little uneasy, because they're like, yeah, you bring our bed, which is great, but this is not a house. And so now you're going out for dinner and we're here in this weird place that smells weird. And we as humans can't even comprehend what that means for an animal. And so when we started traveling in our fifth wheel, now we bring our home to wherever we're going. So now, that's their second home. Everything in there smells like us. It's not a different place. It might be parked in a different park, and it's fun to go outside on adventures, but the home stays the same, and everything where their bed is, where their food bowl is all the same for them. So it has really been the perfect way of traveling with our pets.
I love that.
Yeah, what great conversation. Yeah, we could probably go on forever. And, I highly encourage all of our listeners and our viewers to go and check out your podcast. Again, it's the Animal Files podcast on all the major podcast channels, and the link will be in the description. You also have a website?
Yes, we do.
Okay, and share that with us.
It's the animalfilespodcast.com. We also have like Patreon, we have Facebook groups, you can find us everywhere. Just do a search for the Animal Files podcast, and I'm sure you'll find us.
That's perfect. Well, I'm so pleased that we were able to get together and have you on the show. You certainly are people with passion for pets, so I appreciate you much, and really enjoyed the conversation.
We did too.
It was fun. Thank you for having us.
Yes,
It's been
thank you
nice.
so much for having us.
Thanks so much for joining us on People with Passion for Pets. If you enjoyed this interview, then you might also like a lot of our other interviews. So check out my playlist over here for the second season of People with Passion for Pets. And until next time, keep your paws on the road.